Lately, I've been, whenever anybody asks me how I'm doing, I'm thinking about what's going on in Ukraine and some of the other things that are going on in the world. And I'm like, I could complain for 5 minutes or so, but I got nothing to complain about. I'm blessed. Expanding possibilities, the Mindset Zone.
I'm your host, Ana Melikian. And before we start with today's show, please remember to visit mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com, it's .zone. There you can find all the episodes and other amazing resources, all at mindset.zone. In this episode, we are rebroadcasting a conversation where Jordan Goldrich, the author of Workplace Warrior, interviews me for his namesake podcast, Workplace Warrior. Our subject was, you are your own worst boss.
Ana is an optimist who had to overcome 2 bouts with cancer to learn that pursuing happiness is a fallacy and choosing happiness is a much more powerful strategy to tap into your highest potential. So either by working with leaders and their teams or other coaches and consultants, Ana supports her clients to break through their mindset limitations and upgrade their psychological operating system so that they achieve better results than ever in work, in life, and that also they enjoy the process. She's the host of the Mindset Zone podcast, which has been selected for Huffington Post's 15 podcasts that will leave you pondering life's big questions. And I have a hunch we may get into some big questions today as we talk. And it's listed alongside the Peabody Award-winning On Being and TED Radio Hour by NPR. So that's pretty incredible. She was born in Portugal, and she now lives in Phoenix, Arizona, with her husband, her daughter, and her dog, Puffy. I met Ana through the Association of Corporate Executive Coaches, also known as acec-association.org. And we're both on the membership committee. And you can find out more about Ana at anamelikian.com. So welcome, Ana.
A pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. And it feels kind of weird having you on my podcast because we connect so much in other circles, but it's really, really good. So I'd like to start off by giving our listeners a sense of, what I think is your incredible journey, that ended up with you learning to choose happiness rather than pursue happiness. I really like that phrase. And, tell our listeners a little bit about it.
And it's life lessons and hopefully learning from them. As you said when you introduced me, I'm lucky to be born an optimist with the tendency to see the glass half full. And at the same time, I also part of our culture that I think is a lot about the value of pursuing happiness. And I really had that as a goal that I was proud of, and I really aspire to it. And it took me really the overcoming cancer to realize that it could be a blind spot. Because if we embrace too tight the work hard to deserve success, the pursuing happiness can become like the goal that we will never achieve because it's always in the horizon. And I think that we are better served as individuals and as in society if we learn to embrace every little moment. And instead of seeing happiness as a goal, we can see it as a way of being in our day-to-day is much more valuable.
Yeah, even by using the word choosing rather than pursuing, it means you're there and you have choice and power to do it.
Yeah, and it's a little bit the contra narrative, because we live, even in sports, no pain, no gain. We have to push to get there,
Yes.
hustle. And I'm not saying that we don't have to work hard and that life is not tough. What I'm trying is to, and that was the change for me, to, even when life gets tough, because it gets, we still have the power of choosing some of the elements of that.
Yes. Lately, I've been, whenever anybody asks me how I'm doing, I'm thinking about what's going on in Ukraine and some of the other things that are going on in the world. And I'm like, I could complain for 5 minutes or so, but I got nothing to complain about. I'm blessed.
And it's always, even with my journey with cancer, that people always say it was not a choice. Absolutely not.
Yes.
But I can think about worse things than that. And even in terms of illness, things like Lou Gehrig's disease or some other stuff. That is all. But this again is, if we see, we always can see things in different perspectives. What is the perspective that we can use to be helpful for us at the moment? Yeah.
Absolutely. It reminds me a little bit. I read a book recently called The Big Leap, and I actually did a podcast on it a couple of months ago. And the guy who wrote that, whose name I'm blocking on at the moment, suggested that when we feel bad and we have our, he didn't use this term, but internal gremlins going, that what's going on is feeling good is trying to pop out. And we have our internal limitations, and which dictate how much happiness, how much abundance, how much success, how much love we're allowed to feel. And actually, it's a moment where you can make a choice, as you're saying, that you can either look around for what's trying to pop through that's really positive and more positive than you would allow, or you can feel bad and get caught up in your negative conversation.
Absolutely. And it's a lot about learning to really our inner critical voice that is so often there. And I think it's important to be aware of it.
Yes.
But then to put it in perspective. And we only can do that by center ourselves, or helps a lot if we manage to press the pause button and allow our wiser self to come out a little. And having said that, also I want to add that sometimes, mainly because you spoke about Ukrainian people there, people that are living situations like happening there, they feel bad, and they have all the reasons to feel bad. We cannot do a panacea of positive emotions. It's not just a question of, just smile and be happy. Sometimes life circumstances can be very, very hard. And when we are in the middle of it, even let's not go to that extreme of the war, but let's think about a divorce, a job loss. And when our world is crumbling around us, I think doesn't help that positive attitude, just smile and be happy. That I think will even can work against this, what we in psychology nowadays, we speak about the toxic positivity.
Actually, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that.
That term, because we have, if we see things in a very, sometimes we have to, or not sometimes, I think it's healthy to develop the capacity of embracing sometimes contradictory kind of concepts. I think is important to cultivate positivity, to embrace positivity, to make a choice of happiness. And at the same time, that doesn't mean that negative things don't happen. and we don't have sometimes to leave a space to mourn and leave a space to process that.
Yes.
The two things are equally true.
Yeah. As I'm listening to you talk, I'm realizing that I didn't somehow mention in your, when I introduced you, that I think you have a doctorate in psychology. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And you also have 2 masters in psychology?
Yes, in psychotherapy. I am a lifelong learner. I love to learn.
Wow. That was amazing. I didn't know that. I knew you were a doctor, but I didn't realize that you have your doctorate, but I didn't realize that you have the other 2. So one of your topics is the happiness fallacy. And I know that there are 7 blind spots, and, give our listeners a sense of, what are the blind spots around the happiness fallacy?
And the happiness fallacy is the name of my keynote that I present, and hopefully in the near future also a book. And is my mission. I love to study positive psychology, neuroscience, and all the new things that we have in the field of psychology. And at the same time, I like to articulate what we know from research in ways that people can understand without oversimplifying, because I think sometimes in social media, things are oversimplified. So when I decide to call it the happiness fallacies, it's the misbeliefs around that we have around many of these topics of happiness and well-being that can prevent us from tapping into our potential. And in the keynote, I uncover 7 blind spots, that is seven misbeliefs around this. One of them is to have pursuing happiness as a goal. Okay. Like you spoke here in the beginning, that is the first one. So happiness doesn't need to be a goal. It can be a way of being. And I go over my personal journey to see my blind spot first, and then to see how much more possibilities were open when I start to see happiness as a choice. Another blind spot that I explore is that we touch already here in our conversation today, is sometimes the misbelief that it's just a question of smiling and be happy, and then things start to fall into place, and the power of positive thinking that exists. And at the same time, if we believe that we can willpower our way into happiness, we are going to fail. It's not just a question of happiness is something that happens in a spontaneous way. We cannot force it. Mm. It's like,
so does that mean that when I was a kid and I was upset, my parents told me snap out of it, that wasn't right?
Most of the time doesn't work.
By the way, that was a joke. My parents didn't do that.
But we do that to ourselves. We do that.
Absolutely.
Oh gosh, we have to feel hope. We have to feel positive. It's like we have to fall asleep. No, we are not. I like to ask people to imagine that happiness is like a plant, and a plant that we want to cherish and that we want to make it grow, but we cannot make to grow this plant by pulling its leaves. If we try to make a plant grow by pulling its leaves, we are killing the plant. So if you are trying to force to be happy, is the best recipe for being miserable. But like if you have plants, you can create conditions that allow that plant to thrive. Make sure that humidity is in a good range, that there is a good sun exposure for that plant. And I think for positivity and for happiness in our lives, it's the same thing. We can cultivate positivity and we can create conditions that allow positive emotions to happen. And then we really can build a better future for ourselves and present for ourselves and for the ones around us too.
Yes. So throw out a couple more.
Okay. Another one that I think, and that is like where I I absolutely get in the top of my soapbox. You said in the introduction that I have a podcast called The Mindset Zone. So that tells something about that, how much I believe in the importance of mindset and the work with mindset. And at the same time, mindsets have limitations to the concept of mindset, and the power of changing our thoughts have limitations too. And what I mean by that is that if we read things on the high performance world, and in many, even in the coaching world, and even in the psychotherapy, I will argue, world, there is a little bit the view that, okay, if we work our mindsets, if we change the way we think, that will change the way we feel, the behaviors, the actions that we do, and the results we get. And that is absolutely true. And at the same time, gives this almost unidirectional kind of linear perspective, almost as a causality, that the only way to change is changing the thoughts that will change the way we feel, the way we act, and the results we get. And I'm not saying that we cannot change in that way. What I'm trying to say is that the mindsets and thoughts are not the be all end all. And sometimes to change, depending of the circumstances, depending of the people, sometimes if we use the behavior, for instance, if you are in a situation that you are really trying very, very hard to change your thinking and your mindset, and you are not getting anywhere, just go for a walk in nature. Just disconnect. And just that action of walking, stop thinking about that, and let yourself be, can be the thing that you need at that moment to allow change to happen.
Yeah, because if I'm understanding what you're saying, I think neuroscience has discovered that you also have to have an emotional connection. You just can't change what you're thinking. It actually has to be an emotional experience.
Yes, and I'm trying to, because I know that when we speak, I know when we are doing a talk or when we are writing, we have to use a linear kind of thing, first, second, and third. But the reality is a little bit more complex. I like to ask people to imagine that instead of seeing like in a linear way, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, see these as the three sides of a triangle. So if you imagine a triangle, it's a form with three sides. And if any of these sides ceases to exist, you stop having a triangle. You don't have a form. So we need these three dimensions. We need our thinking, our mindsets. We need our feelings, our emotions, and we have behaviors, actions, implementation. All of these are three important sides of us, and we can initiate the process of change by any of these three sides. And any change or transformation in one of the sides is going to have an effect on the other sides. And if we see this in this way, in my opinion, first we have more options for changing, and we have more room to do things in a different way. I like to kid that it will not be wonderful if watching an inspiring TED talk was enough to change us. We could spend all the day watching inspiring TED Talks, but we know that reality is a little bit more complex than that.
Yes. So I want to pick up on this and talk about my own experience a little bit with trying to change. But before I do that, I want to take a break and just remind everyone, number one, that Ana, who is our guest today, obviously, is the host of the Mind Zone podcast. And again, it's been selected for the Huffington Post 15 podcasts that will leave you pondering life's big questions. And you can listen to her very powerful podcast conversations at http://mindset.zone. And I also want to mention that the Workplace Warrior podcast is sponsored by Workplace Warrior, Inc., and we partner with strong, successful leaders to be completely authentic while they accomplish their mission and take results to an even higher level. And if you're an executive who'd like to have a complimentary conversation about driving results without damaging relationships, you can contact me at jordan@jordangoldrich.com. And so where I wanted to go with that,
and before you go there, I just, for the listeners that are listening now, so you are listening in the Workplace Warrior podcast, subscribe to this podcast first. It's so easy to subscribe. And if you can write it, really helps for more people afterwards to see it. And of course, after that, you can go to look in your podcast app to mindset.zone, or mind without the dot, mindset zone, and you will find my podcast that I would love you to follow me there too. So, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, just drop 2 or 3 titles and who you interviewed, because it's very impressive.
I had in my podcast had the opportunity of speaking with people from the authors and people in the podcasting world. I had the pleasure of interviewing my mentor and friend Michael Port in my podcast. I also interview people that maybe are not so known for the general public, but they doing transformational work out there, like Liba Pinchot, that has incredible work in the sustainability, and she worked with big organizations with this concept of entrepreneurship. People like CB Bowman, that is the founder of the ACC that we spoke here, but also even people, other authors, like the writer. He wrote this beautiful book that I really recommend, is Existentialism. Now you are putting me on the spot, and I don't want to give it a different name than the name. So give me just one moment here.
Oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay not to be perfect. But listen, let me while you're looking, let me interrupt and mention that I interviewed CB on one of my podcasts, one of the real early ones. And I was on her podcast, as I know you were. And CB is really incredible. She's the founder of the Association of Corporate Executive Coaches. And boy, did she challenge me. I can't remember whether she challenged me on my podcast or I know she challenged me on hers. So, and hers wasn't a podcast. Hers was a LinkedIn Live. But did you have that same experience with her?
Oh, yes. She always, how do you say, she has very powerful questions. And the LinkedIn Live then becomes a podcast. So people can find it I think if they look for CB Live, they will find our podcasts. And is always very interesting to have conversations and to listen to our conversations, and because you really get a different perspective, and people have to go outside their sound bites. Let's put it that way.
So I'm going to do a quick break.
We are speaking about other people that I had the privilege to talk to, and I was saying people like Greg McKinnon. He wrote his Essentialism, and now he has the book. More recent book is the Effortless. And one conversation, we were speaking about interesting conversations that sometimes we can have in podcasting. I had the privilege of interviewing the grandson of Viktor Frankl.
Oh my God.
Alexander Vasily. That was one of the joys that interesting to be able to, and yes, he's a director and producer, and he has a beautiful book about his grandfather that I really advise people to to check it out.
Oh my gosh, I did not realize that. I am going to have to go because Viktor Frankl made a very big impact on my life. And he also made a very big impact on psychology in terms of how therapy was produced. And his book was called Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
And it was written, obviously, before the current women's movement. But but basically, he was a Holocaust survivor, and he shared his perception that the people who came out of concentration camps, relatively intact, had purpose.
Yeah.
And that was really a change for me, because before that I had been introduced to Freudian and cognitive behavioral, and I had not really started thinking about purpose until I read his book. That was where I got introduced.
And think about how important is that today, because even when we think about in companies now, everybody is speaking about the Great Resignation. It's not one of the reasons that so many people are changing if they can, or trying to find something else, the lack of purpose, the lack of meaning in what they are doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is the core that you really underline, looking for that meaning and that purpose in our lives. In psychotherapy, that is was helping people. But in general, I think that is so important and so timely even today.
I totally agree. Even in, there's Simon Sinek is now has Start With Why and Find Your Why. And he has very beautifully talked about, many thousands of years at this point of philosophy that basically says you need to know who you are and why you're there. He's got some different language around it, but increasingly it's really about what do you stand for as a human being, and who are you, and what are your core values?
And there is always, we can as individuals articulate it in different ways that resonate and are more meaningful for us. And I will argue that at the end of the day, there is a common theme, is making a positive impact and a sense of leaving some kind of positive legacy out there. How are we making a positive difference?
I totally agree. I think, except for the, 13% of people or 3% of people who are sociopaths who don't care. For most of us, that's really important to make a positive difference.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that small percentage, if they have position of power, can do a lot of damage. Absolutely.
That is one of the things I have found about executives who are experienced as abrasive and even called bullies and a few other interesting names, is that most of them don't want to hurt people. Yeah. And they don't realize the impact they're having. And most of them feel like the pressure that they get to be more polite and take care of people and be more protective is kind of politically correct bull. And one of the things that, and for my listeners who know me, I once lost a job over that. And at some point I had similar beliefs. And at some point I realized that being a successful leader, which I really wanted to be, had to do with having, hearing what people are saying because they know stuff that I don't know. And what I find is that most of the leaders, after they get past, I shouldn't have to do this and don't push me to be polite, actually can find some very core reasons why it would be authentic for them to be more respectful.
And again, it's going to that what we are speaking, that we have to be able to embrace things that at the surface seem contradictory or opposites.
Yes.
Because it's transcend, go beyond that level. Because yes, we want to listen, and we also, as leaders, have to take charge. And we have to accomplish goals, but there are different ways to lead our team to do that.
Yes. By the way, in our previous conversations, I use the Navy SEALs ethos to talk about powerful leadership. And a couple of pieces of it are take charge, lead their teams, and accomplish the mission. And one of the things that you had mentioned to me is that you really relate to that in terms of, being your own, thinking about your own self, but you also see it as connected to being your own worst boss. And I'm curious about that.
Yeah, the thing is that many coaches, consultants, and experts, we decide to go to do our own business because, okay, it's the time for it. We want to leave an impact out there. And we have our list of complaints about our previous bosses. And what I find interesting is that sometimes we fall into the trap of becoming the things that we criticize, that we didn't like, we are doing to ourselves. That is when that I say we become our own worst bosses. And starting with awareness, why are we doing this to ourselves? Why are we letting this inner critic to bully us in so many different ways?
Yes.
That allow us to, okay, what can I learn for leaders, like you're saying, from other fields and leaders we admire, and we still can take, because sometimes it's the idea that if we are not bullying us to do things, almost we are going to be lazy and not do anything. No. We can, like you were saying, what were the three things? We can take charge, lead ourselves and the people that we work with, and accomplish our goals. We absolutely can do that without bullying ourselves, without demeaning, but by learning how to become better self-leaderships. And so much in the leadership training is about becoming about self-leadership.
Absolutely. Actually, I just remembered there was something I was going to ask you about before, and it's came back. So I have a very critical leader inside, and I've been working on it now for many, many years. And what I find is that at this point, I've just had to accept it. And also recognize that my internal bully actually has my best interests at heart. Doesn't want me to fail, is worried that this is going to happen, just wants me to be the best. But a lot of times it's just wrong. And I have not been able to get rid of it, but I have certainly been able to have different kind of conversation with it over the years. And my bully has calmed down a whole lot. Yeah. And I'm curious as to how you approach it.
And I think because some of that inner critics, they are there for a reason. They were important in some moment of our lives. They even save us in some moment in our lives and our development. Good or bad, maybe there will have been a better way, but we develop that way to take us out of some kind of situation.
Yes.
The problem is that when they get in overdrive, and when they start to live rent-free in our heads, and we are not putting them in their place.
Yes.
Because there is a side, I'd say, you're saying, help me achieve things. Wanting to achieve things and goals is a positive drive. If we get it in overdrive, then starts to push us down and working against us. So how can we listen to the important information that sometimes they are calling our attention to, but then put them in their place and really, okay, I heard what I need to hear about that. So now you got my attention. Thank you. Bye-bye. You can go, you can shrink in size and let me see what my the wiser self, my self-guide, my self-leader has to say about this, and how can use this information in a more meaningful way. And to do that, because it's a lot about stopping the reactive mode and be more proactive. Gosh,
Yes.
this is Steve Covey that popularized this. And the big thing is that the pause button that we have to press to not react and to be able to choose our response.
Yeah.
That is the critical element, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's interesting how I have a slightly different internal conversation with my internal critic, but it's almost the same. It's sort of like, thank you for sharing. I know you have my best interest at heart.
Yes.
And I've been thinking about this, and I'm going to try something else. So calm down.
Yes. And I love that is from a very positive place, a very positive conversation. So love that. Absolutely love it.
So, this may be I'm looking at the clock here and realizing that we're coming down towards the end. And I'm thinking this might be a good place for me to ask you, do you have any last thoughts for our audience?
And be gentle with themselves. So if you are listening, yes, there is a lot of room to grow. There is a lot of things that we can improve. And one of the best skills that we can learn is to be gentle with ourselves. And that doesn't mean that we are not going to inspire ourselves to change, to become better people, but it's not by bullying ourselves that we are going to get there faster.
Absolutely. And I think the real key is, working with somebody like yourself to figure out how to do that.
Yep. And we know so much. We have, in terms of the psychology, I know that you also have a background in psychology and psychotherapy, and you bring a lot of that to inform the amazing work that you do with abrasive leaders and companies nowadays. We have so much more information nowadays about how to tap into the human potential, how to help individuals, teams, companies to be much more from that cultivating positive standpoint and increase performance with a purpose, that not being actualizing that knowledge, I think is something that I'm in a mission to change.
Yeah. Well, super. And if somebody wanted to connect with you and have a conversation with you about their mission to change, how might they do that?
The easiest way and the evergreen way is possibly go to my website. That is my first name, Ana, A-N-A, last name Melikian, MELIKIAN.com. And there will be a contact page that will have my update information to reach me out. This episode was rebroadcast here at the Mindset Zone with explicit consent from Jordan Goldrich, the host of the Workplace Warrior. Let's support each other. Please follow his amazing podcast wherever you listen this podcast.
Expanding possibilities, the Mindset Zone.
Thank you for listening, and remember to visit mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com, it's .zone. There you can find all the episodes and other amazing resources, all at mindset.zone. As always, I'm so grateful you are here. Expand what's possible for you, for the ones around you, for the world.